Senator from Alaska.
I ask consent to speak as if in morning business for 7 minutes.
Is there an objection? Without objection.
Madam President, I rise today to seek the continued support of my colleagues for recognition of a group of patriotic heroes who defended Alaska, our nation, from our enemies in World War II. In 1935, the famed Army General Billy Mitchell told Congress, quote, "I believe that it is the future. Whoever holds Alaska will hold the world, and I think it's the most important strategic place in the world." General Mitchell was right. Less than a decade later, Alaska became the first American soil occupied by a foreign enemy since the Revolutionary War. To counter Japanese aggression against the territory of Alaska during World War II, a group of Alaskan natives voluntarily formed the Alaska Territorial Guard. These brave men engaged in direct combat, as described by my colleague from Alaska, Senator Murkowski, with the enemy on protecting all of Alaska. They shot down Japanese air balloons, conducted scouting patrols, carried out rescue missions of downed airmen, built military airstrips, and rescue shelters they built. They played a key role in logistic support for the U.S. military, stationed in Alaska, by delivering food, ammunition, and other equipment to the forces. Their actions were vital to successful U.S. military efforts, preventing our enemies from securing strategic locations during the war. As you can see by these photos, surrounding me, the Alaska Territorial Guard was a unique group. They were mostly subsistence hunters and fishermen, the main breadwinners and earners in their families, living in some of the most remote villages in the entire country. Receiving no pay, no recognition for their service, the Territorial Guard mission was driven by a single value: patriotism. Many of these members continued their service for years in the U.S. military after Alaska Territorial Guard was disbanded in 1947. Unfortunately, the contributions of the Alaska Territorial Guard during World War II went unrecognized for half a century. In 2000, Congress finally acknowledged our nation's debt to these brave men by qualifying their time spent in the Alaska Territorial Guard as federal service. Congress also directed the Secretary of the Army to issue discharge certificates to all those who served in the Territorial Guard. These discharge certificates entitled ATG members to veterans benefits and was interpreted by the Department of Defense to count as service in the Alaska Territorial Guard toward retirement credit. 26 former members of Alaska Territorial Guard finally began receiving a well-earned pension from the government. At long last, the sacrifice and contributions of Alaska natives during World War II were recognized. Then in January of this year, abruptly, without warning, the Defense Finance Accounting Services stopped issuing pensions to these 26 Guardsmen. This was based on a finding that their service was not federal, and therefore the payments were not legal. Thankfully, former Army Secretary Pete Guerin issued temporary payments to ease the economic hardship experienced by these heroes while we worked on the more permanent solution. To its credit, the Alaska legislature stepped up where the federal government fell short. The state is paying their pensions until Congress can provide a permanent solution, a legislative solution, until February 2010, whichever comes first. I cannot imagine another situation where Congress would stand by and let veterans' entitlements be revoked and their sacrifices go unrecognized. Luckily, my Senate colleague also recognized this injustice, and I want to thank my colleague from Alaska, Senator Murkowski. She introduced S-342, a bill to provide the treatment of service as a member of the Alaska Territorial Guard during World War II as an active service for purposes of retired pay and restore their pensions. And I'm a proud co-sponsor of this legislation. Working together with the leader, Levin of the Armed Services Committee, Senator Levin, and the ranking member, Senator McCain, we worked to make sure the pension amendment was in the National Defense Authorization Act for the year 2010, supported by unanimous consent by the Senate. And most recently, the Senate Appropriations Committee included the same provision in the Defense Appropriation Act for fiscal 2010. However, I was extremely disappointed to learn the Statement of Administration Policy for fiscal year 2010 Defense Appropriation Bill that the National Administration has voiced objection to the provision that would count Alaska Territorial Guard service as active duty time for retirement pay. I remind my colleagues that the Alaska Territorial Guard members were not state employees. They were patriotic Alaskan natives answering the call of duty from their country. Allowing their service in the Alaska Territorial Guard to count as federal service cannot set a precedent because there is no other group like them in this country. They served the U.S. in a time of war by defending an American territory from the enemy. They engaged in combat, and they did this because they felt the same sense of patriotism during World War II that every active member of the Army and Air Force and every other military branch did. Madam President, these brave Alaskans are now in their 70s and 80s. Just this past Monday, one of them, Nikolai of Kwethluk, passed away before he could see this issue resolved. I ask my colleagues for their continued support to ensure that the now 25 Alaska Natives who defended this nation receive the earned pension by supporting the provision in the National Defense Authorization Act and Defense Appropriation Act for fiscal year 2010. I also ask and join my colleague, Senator Murkowski, and ask the administration to re-examine the objection to restoring retirement payments and honor our World War II veterans. Our time is running short to correct this injustice and restore these modest payments. The federal government turned its back on these men at the end of the war. I hope Congress and my colleagues in the Senate won't let that happen. I yield back my time.